Section 3. Pell, Blue Sector 5, 9-2-52. The apartment was tidied, the odds and ends tucked into hampers. Damon shrugged into his jacket, straightened his collar. Aline was still dressing, fussing at a waistline that, perhaps, bound a little. It was the second suit she had tried. She looked frustrated with this one, too. He walked up behind her and gave her a gentle hug about the middle, met her eyes in the mirror. "You look fine, so what if it shows a little?" She studied them both in the mirror, put her hand on his. "It looks more like I'm gaining weight." "You look wonderful," he said, expecting a smile. Her mirrored face stayed anxious. He lingered a moment, held her because she seemed to want that. "Is it all right?" he asked. She had, perhaps, overdone, had gone out of her way to look right, had gotten special items from commissary, was nervous about the whole evening, he thought. Therefore, the effort. Therefore, the fretting about small things. "Does having Tally come here bother you?" Her fingers traced his slowly. "I don't think it does. But I'm not sure I know what to say to him. I've never entertained a unioner." He dropped his arms, looked her in the eyes when she turned about. The exhausting preparations, all the anxiety to please. It was not enthusiasm. He had feared so. "You suggested it. I asked if you were sure. Aline, if you felt in the least awkward in it. He's ridden your conscience for over 3 months. Forget my qualms. I'm curious. Shouldn't I be?" He suspected things. A more than willingness to accommodate him. That balance sheet Aline kept. Gratitude, maybe, or her way of trying to tell him she cared. He remembered the long evenings, Aline brooding on her side of the table, he on his, her burden Estelle and his, the lives he handled. He had talked about Tally a certain night he ended up listening to her instead, and when the chance came, such gestures were like Aline. He could not remember bringing her another problem but that. So she took it, tried to solve it, however hard it was. Unioner. He had no way of knowing what she felt under those circumstances. He had thought he knew. "Don't look that way," she said. "I'm curious," I said. "But it's a social situation. What do you say? Talk over old times? Have we possibly met before, Mr. Tally? Exchanged fire, maybe? Or maybe we talk over family. How's yours, Mr. Tally? Or maybe we talk about hospital. How have you enjoyed your stay on Pell, Mr. Tally?" "Aline, you asked. I wish I'd known how you felt about it." "How do you feel about it? Honestly." "Awkward," he confessed, leaned against the counter. "But, Aline, if you want to know what I feel about it, I'm uneasy. Just uneasy. He's coming here, and he'll be here for us to entertain, and frankly, I don't know what we're going to do with him." She turned to the mirror and tugged at the waistline. "All of which is what I think. I'm hoping he'll be at ease, and we'll all have a pleasant evening." He could see it otherwise. Long silences. "I've got to go get him," he said. "He'll be waiting." And then, with a happier thought, "Why don't we go up to the concourse? Never mind the things here. It might make things easier all around, neither of us having to play host." Her eyes lightened. "Meet you there? I'll get a table. There's nothing that can't go in the freeze." "Do it." He kissed her on the ear, all that was available, and gave her a pat, headed out in haste to make up the time. The security desk sent a call back for Tally, and he was quick in coming down the hall. A new suit. Everything new. Damon met him and held out his hand. Tally's face took on a different smile as he took it, quickly faded. "You're already checked out," Damon told him, and gathered up a small plastic wallet from the desk, gave it to him. "When you check in again, this makes it all automatic. Those are your ID papers and your credit card, and a chit with your comp number. You memorize the comp number and destroy the chit." Tally looked at the papers inside, visibly moved. "I'm discharged?" Evidently, staff had not gotten around to telling him. His hands trembled, slender fingers shaking in their course over the fine printed words. He stared at them, taking time to absorb the matter, until Damon touched his sleeve, drew him from the desk and down the corridor. "You look well," Damon said. It was so. Their images reflected back from the transparent doors ahead, dark and light, his own solid aquiline darkness, and Tally's pallor like illusions. Of a sudden, he thought of Aline, felt the least insecurity in Tally's presence, the comparison in which he felt all his faults, not alone the look of him, but the look from inside, that stared at him guiltless, which had always been guiltless. What do I say to him? He echoed Aline's ugly questions. Sorry? Sorry I never got around to reading your folder? Sorry I executed you? We were pressed for time? Forgive me. Usually we do better. He opened the door and Tally met his eyes in passing through. No accusations. No bitterness. He doesn't remember. Can't. Your pass, Damon said as they walked toward the lift, is what's called white-tagged. See the colored circles by the door there? There's a white one, too. Your card is a key, so's your comp number. If you see a white circle, you have access by card or number. The computer will accept it. Don't try anything when there's no white. You'll have alarms sounding and security running in a hurry. You know such systems, don't you? I understand. You recall your comp skills? A few spaces of silence. Arms comps is specialized, but I recall some theory. Much of it? If I sat in front of a board, probably I would remember. Do you remember me? They had reached the lift. Damon punched the button for private call, privileges of his security clearance. He wanted no crowd. He turned, met Tally's too open gaze. Normal adults flinched, moved the eyes, glanced this way and that, focused on one and the other detail. Tally's stare lacked such movements, like a madman's, or a child's, or a graven god's. I remember you asking that before, Tally said. You're one of the Constantines. You own Pell, don't you? Not own, but we've been here a long time. I haven't, have I? An undertone of worry. What is it? Damon wondered with a crawling of his own skin. What is it to know bits of your mind are gone? How can anything make sense? We met when you came here. You ought to know. I'm the one who agreed to the adjustment. Legal Affairs Office. I signed the commitment papers. There was then a little flinching. The car arrived. Damon put his hand inside to hold the door. You gave me the papers, Tally said. He stepped inside, and Damon followed. Let the door close. The car started moving to the green he had coded. You kept coming to see me. You were the one who was there so often, weren't you? Damon shrugged. I didn't want what happened. I didn't think it was right. You understand that? Do you want something of me? Willingness was implicit in the tone, at least acquiescence, in all things anyway. Damon returned the stare. Forgiveness, maybe, he said, cynical. That's easy. Is it? That's why you came to see me? Why you asked me to come with you now? What did you suppose? The wide-field stare clouded a bit, seemed to focus. I have no way to know. It's kind of you to come. Did you think it might not be kind? I don't know how much memory I have. I know there are gaps. I could have known you before. I could remember things that aren't so. It's all the same. You did nothing to me. Did you? I could have stopped it. I asked for adjustment, didn't I? I thought that I asked. You asked, yes. Then I remember something right. Or they told me. I don't know. Shall I go on with you? Or is that all you wanted? You'd rather not go? A series of blinks. I thought, when I wasn't so well, that I might have known you. I had no memory at all then. I was glad you came. It was someone. Outside the walls. And the books. Thank you for the books. I was very glad to have them. Look at me. Tally did so, an instant centering. A touch of apprehension. I want you to come. I'd like you to come. That's all. To where you said? To meet your wife? To meet Eileen. And to see Pell. The better side of it. He thought. All right. Tally's regard stayed with him. The drifting, he thought. That was defense. Retreat. The direct gaze trusted. From a man with gaps in his memory, trust was all-encompassing. I know you, Damon said. I've read the hospital proceedings. I know things about you I don't know about my own brother. I think it's fair to tell you that. Everyone's read them. Who, everyone? Everyone I know. The doctors, all of them in the center. He thought that over. Hated the thought that anyone should submit to that much intrusion. The transcripts will be erased. Like me. The ghost of a smile quirked Tally's mouth. Sadness. It wasn't a total restruct, Damon said. Do you understand that? I know as much as they told me. The car was coming slowly to rest in Green 1. The doors opened on one of the busiest corridors in Pell. Other passengers wanted in. Damon took Tally's arm, shepherded him through. Some few heads turned at their presence in the crowd. The sight of a stranger of unusual aspect, or the face of a Constantine. Mild curiosity. Voices babbled, undisturbed. Music drifted from the concourse, thin, sweet notes. A few of the downer workers were in the corridor, tending the plants which grew there. He and Tally walked with the general flow of traffic, anonymous within it. The hall opened onto the concourse, a darkness, the only light in it coming from the huge projection screens which were its walls, views of stars, of Downbelow's crescent, of the blaze of the filtered sun. The docks viewed from outside cameras. The music was leisurely, an enchantment of electronics and chimes, and sometime quiver of bass, balanced moment by moment to the soft tenor of conversation at the tables which filled the center of the curving hall. The screens changed with the ceaseless spin of Pell itself, and images switched in time from one to another to the screens which extended from floor to lofty ceiling. The floor and the tiny human figures and the tables alone were dark. Gwen Constantine, he said to the young woman at the counter by the entry. A waiter at once moved to guide them to the reserved table. But Tally had stopped. Damon looked back, found him staring about at the screens with a heart-open look on his face. Josh, Damon said, and when he did not react, gently took his arm. This way. Balance deserted some newcomers to the concourse, difficulty with the slow spin of the images which dwarfed the tables. He kept the grip all the way to the table, a prime one on the margin, with unimpeded views of the screens. Aline rose at their arrival. "Josh Talley," Damon said. "Aline Quinn, my wife." Aline blinked. Most reacted to Talley. Slowly, she extended her hand, which he took. "Josh, is it? Aline." She settled back to her chair, and they took theirs. The waiter stood expectantly. "Another," she said. "Special," Damon said. Looked at Talley. "Any preference? Or trust me?" Talley shrugged, looking uncomfortable. "Two," Damon said, and the waiter vanished. He looked at Aline. "Crowded this evening." "Not many residents go to the dockside lately," Aline said. That was so. The beached merchanters had staked out a couple of the bars exclusively, a running problem with security. "They serve dinner here," Damon said, looking at Talley. "Sandwiches, at least." "I've eaten," he said in a remote tone, fit to stop any conversation. "Have you," Aline asked, "spent much time on stations?" Damon reached for her hand under the table, but Talley shook his head quite undisturbed. "Only Russell's. Pell is the best of them." She slid past that pit without looking at it. One shot declined, Damon thought, wondering if Aline meant what she did. Nothing like this at the others. Quinn is a merchanter's name. Was. They were destroyed at Mariner. Damon clenched his hand on hers in her lap. Talley stared at her, stricken. "I'm sorry." Aline shook her head. "Not your fault, I'm sure. Merchanters get it from both sides. Bad luck. That's all." "You can't remember," Damon said. "Can you?" Aline asked. Talley shook his head slightly. "So?" Aline said. "It's neither here nor there. I'm glad you could come. The deep spat you out. Only a stationer dice with you." Damon remained perplexed, but Talley smiled wanly, some remote joke he seemed to comprehend. "I suppose so." "Luck and luck," Aline said, glanced aside at him and tightened her hand. "You can dice and win on the dockside, but old Deep loads his. Carry a man like that for luck. Touch him for it. Here's to survivors, Josh Talley." Bitter irony? Or an effort at welcome? It was merchanter's humor, impenetrable as another language. Talley seemed relaxed by it. Damon drew back his hand and settled back. "Did they discuss the matter of a job, Josh?" "No." "You are discharged. If you can't work, station will carry you for a while. But I did arrange something tentatively, that you can go to of mornings, work as long as you feel able. Go back home by noon, main days. Would that appeal to you?" Talley said nothing, but the look on his face, half lit in the images of the sun, it was nearest now in the slow rotation, wanted it, hung on to it. Damon leaned his arms on the table, embarrassed now to give the little that he had arranged. "A disappointment, perhaps. You have higher qualifications. Small machine salvage. A job, at least, on your way to something else. And I've found a room for you in the old merchanter's central hospice. Bath, but no kitchen. Things are incredibly tight. Your job credit is guaranteed by station law to cover basic food and lodging. Since you don't have a kitchen, your card's good in any restaurant up to a certain limit. There are things you have to pay for above that, but there's always a schedule and comp to list volunteer service jobs that you can apply for to get extras. Eventually, station will demand a full day's work for board and room, but not till you're certified able. Is that all right with you?" "I'm free?" For all reasonable purposes, yes. The drinks arrived. Damon picked up his frothy concoction of summer fruit and alcohol, watched with interest as Tally sampled one of the delicacies of Pell, and reacted with pleasure. He sipped at his own. "You're no stationer," Aline observed after some silence. Tally was gazing beyond them, to the walls, the slow ballet of stars. "You don't get much view on a ship," Aline had said once, trying to explain to him. "Not what you'd think. It's the being there, the working of it, the feel of moving through what could surprise you at any moment. It's being a dust speck in that scale and pushing your way through all that empty on your own terms, that no world can do, and nothing spinning around one. It's doing that, and knowing all the time, Old Goblin Deep is just the other side of the metal you're leaning on. You stationers like your illusions, and world folk, blue skiers, don't even know what real is." He felt a chill suddenly, felt apart, with Aline and a stranger across the table making a set of two. His wife, and the god image that was Tally. It was not jealousy. It was a sense of panic. He drank slowly, watched Tally, who looked at the screens as no stationer did, like a man remembering breathing. "Forget station," he had heard in Aline's voice. "You'll never be content here." As if she and Tally spoke a language he did not, even using the same words. As if a merchanter who had lost her ship to Union could pity a Unioner who had lost his, beached like her. Damon reached out beneath the table, sought Aline's hand, closed it in his. "Maybe I can't give you what you want most," he said to Tally, resisting hurt, deliberately courteous. "Pell won't hold you forever now, and if you can find some merchanter to take you on after your papers are entirely clear, that's open too someday in the future. But take my advice. Plan for a long stay here. Things aren't settled, and the merchanters are moving nowhere but to the mines and back. The long haulers are drinking themselves blind on dockside," Aline muttered. "We'll run out of liquor before we run out of bread on Pell. No, not for a while. Things will get better. God help us. We can't contain what we've swallowed forever." "Aline, isn't he on Pell too?" she asked. "And aren't we all? His living is tied up with it." "I would not," Tally said, "harm Pell." His hand moved on the table, a slight tick. It was one of the few implants, that aversion. Damon kept his mouth shut on the knowledge of the psych block. It was no less real for being deep taught. Tally was intelligent. Possibly even he could figure out eventually what had been done to him. Tally made another random motion of his hand. "Don't know this place. I need help. Sometimes I'm not sure how I got into this. Do you know? Did I know?" Bizarre connection of data. Damon stared at him disquietly. For a moment, afraid that Tally was lapsing into some embarrassing sort of hysteria. Not sure what he was going to do with him in this public place. "I have the records," he answered Tally's question. "That's all the knowledge I have of it." "Am I your enemy?" "I don't think so." "I remember Satine. You're making connections I'm not following, Josh." Lips trembled. "I don't follow them either." "You said you needed help. In what, Josh?" "Here. The station. You won't stop coming by." "You mean visiting you?" "You mean visiting you. You won't be in the hospital anymore." Suddenly the sense of it dawned on him. That Tally knew that. "You mean, do I set you up with a job and cut you loose on your own?" "No. I'll call you next week. Depend on it." "I was going to suggest," Aline said smoothly, that you give Josh comp clearance to get a call through to the apartment. Troubles don't keep office hours, and one or the other of us would be able to untangle situations. We are, legally, your sponsors. If you can't get hold of Damon, call my office." Tally accepted that with a nod of his head. The shifting screens kept their dizzying course. They did not say much for a long time, listened to the music, and nursed that round of drinks into a second. "It would be nice," Eileen said smoothly, "if you'd come to dinner at the end of the week. Chance my cooking. Have a game of cards. You play cards, surely?" Tally's eyes shifted subtly in his direction, as if to ask approval. "It's a long-standing card night," Damon said. "Once a month, my brother and his wife would cross shifts with ours. They were on altar day, transferred to Downbelow since the crisis. Josh does play," he said to Eileen. "Good. Not superstitious," Tally said. "We won't bet," Eileen said. "I'll come." "Fine," she said, and a moment later, Josh's eyes half-lidded. He was fighting it. Came around in an instant. All the tension was out of him. "Josh," Damon said, "you think you can walk out of here?" "I'm not sure," he said, distressed. Damon rose and Eileen did. Very carefully, Tally pushed back from the table and navigated between them. Not the 2 drinks, Damon thought, which had been mild, but the screens and exhaustion. Tally steadied once in the corridor and seemed to catch his breath in the light and stability out there. A trio of downers stared at them, round-eyed above the masks. They both walked him to the lift and rode with him back to the facility in red, returned him through the glass doors and into the custody of the security desk. They were into altar day now, and the guard on duty was one of the Mullers. "See he gets settled all right," Damon said. Beyond the desk, Tally paused, looked back at them both with curious intensity, until the guard came back and drew him down the corridor. Damon put his arm about Eileen, and they started their own walk home. "It was a good thought to ask him," he said. "He's awkward," Eileen said. "But who wouldn't be?" She followed him through the doors into the corridor, walked hand in hand with him down the hall. "The war has nasty casualties," she said. "If any Quinns could have come through Mariner, it would be that. Just the other side of the mirror, wouldn't it? For one of my own. So God help us. Help him. He could as well be one of ours." She had drunk rather more than he, grew morose whenever she did so. He thought of the baby, but it was not the moment to say anything hard with her. He gave her hand a squeeze, ruffled her hair, and they headed home.